What if there was a book that no one on Earth can read? Not because it's lost, not because it's damaged, but because it was never understood in the first place. For over 600 years, this manuscript has been studied, analyzed, and decoded by historians, cryptographers, even modern AI. And yet, not a single word has been confirmed. The language unknown, the symbols unmatched, the illustrations, they don't belong to any known science or any known world. This isn't just a forgotten text, it's a complete system that no one can explain. And here's where it gets stranger. The book is real, you can see it, you can touch it. But the moment you try to understand it, it slips away. No translation, no origin, no definitive meaning. Just pages filled with something that looks like knowledge, but behaves like a mystery. So the question isn't just, what does it say? The real question is, how can something exist and remain completely unknowable? Long before the mystery, there was certainty. Europe was entering an age of knowledge. Manuscripts were more than books. They were power. Every symbol meant something, every illustration had purpose, and every text could be understood if you had the mind for it. And he did. A scholar respected, precise, relentless. The kind of man other thinkers turned to when a text refused to make sense. He had spent years decoding ancient languages, reconstructing lost meanings, pulling clarity out of chaos. To him, there was no such thing as randomness, only patterns waiting to be seen. Students studied under him, collectors trusted him. His reputation wasn't just built on knowledge, but on answers. If something could be read, he would read it. If something could be solved, he would solve it. That was the world before. A world where every mystery had a method, every code had a key. And then he found something that didn't follow any of those rules. It didn't arrive with a warning. No legend, no explanation, no indication that this would be different. Just a book. Passed quietly from one set of hands to another until it reached his. At first glance, it looked like any other manuscript. Aged parchment, carefully drawn illustrations, lines of text arranged with precision. But the moment he looked closer, something didn't align. The symbols were consistent, but not recognizable. The patterns repeated, but didn't resolve into meaning. It was structured, yet completely unreadable. And that was enough. Because to him, that didn't mean impossible. It meant unsolved. he made a decision. Not out of curiosity, but conviction. If this book followed rules, he would find them. If it hit a system, he would break it. Days turned into nights. Notes filled entire pages. Symbols were copied, compared, rearranged. At first, it felt like progress. Fragments that almost made sense, patterns that almost connected. But never fully. There were moments, brief, unsettling moments, where it felt like the text was shifting just beyond understanding. Like it was designed to be almost readable, and then slip away. Still, he continued, because walking away would mean accepting that something existed outside the limits of human reason. And that was a possibility he refused to believe. So he went deeper, further than anyone had before. Without realizing, this wasn't a puzzle waiting to be solved. It was a boundary, and he had just crossed it. At first, it was just fatigue. Long nights, too many symbols, not enough answers. But then, the pattern changed. He began to notice something strange. The text, it wasn't just repeating. It was shifting. Subtle at first, almost impossible to prove. A symbol he was certain about wouldn't look the same the next time he returned to it. Lines he had carefully copied no longer matched the original. He checked his notes again and again. Same result. That's when the doubt began. Not about the book, but about himself. Sleep became rare. Candles burned through the night. The room, once orderly, turned chaotic. Pages scattered, ink stains everywhere, fragments of a system, and that refused to hold. And yet, he kept going. Because every time he stepped away, he felt it. Like the manuscript was still there, waiting, pulling him back. Hours blurred into something indistinct. At some point, he stopped measuring time. Only progress. Only patterns. Only the next attempt. But the closer he looked, the less stable everything became. The illustrations, they didn't just depict unknown plants anymore. They felt intentional, as if they were trying to communicate something just beyond comprehension. And the text, it no longer felt like language. It felt like structure without meaning, order without logic. He started making mistakes, repeating the same analysis, forgetting what he had already proven, losing track of what was real and what was assumption. Then came the moment he couldn't ignore. He looked at a page, one he had studied for hours, and realized he couldn't remember what it said. Not the meaning. Not the pattern. Not even the structure. Just blank. Like the knowledge had never existed. That's when something shifted. Not in the book, but in him. Because for the first time, he wasn't trying to solve it anymore. He was trying to hold on to what little understanding he had left. And it was slipping. Slowly, quietly. Like the manuscript was taking something in return. And no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't stop it. The last record of him son was unfinished. A page half covered in ink. Lines of symbols repeated over and over, as if he was trying to hold on to something that kept slipping away. There were no conclusions, no final notes, no explanation. Just one line, written differently from the rest. Uneven, rushed, almost desperate. And then, nothing. No sign of struggle, no sign of departure. The room was exactly as he left it. The candles burned down to wax, the paper still scattered across the table. And at the center, the manuscript. Open. Untouched. As if it had never been disturbed. He wasn't seen leaving. He wasn't heard calling for help. One moment he was there. And the next, he was gone. No witnesses, no trace. Just silence. And a book that remained. At first, it was treated as a disappearance. A missing scholar, a private study, a room no one thought to question. But that didn't last long, because the details didn't add up. There were no signs of escape, no hidden passage, no reason for a man like him to simply walk away. So the search began. Quietly at first. Close colleagues retraced his steps, reviewed his notes, examined every page he had written. They thought they would find something, a clue, a direction, a mistake. They found nothing. So the search expanded. More scholars, more resources, more time. The manuscript itself became the focus. every symbol reanalyzed, every pattern reconsidered. What had he seen that no one else could? What had he understood that vanished with him? Months passed. Then years. And still no answers. No body, no confirmed sighting, no trace of where he went or how. But the strangest part wasn't the absence of evidence. It was the scale of the effort. Because by then, this wasn't just a missing person case anymore. It had become an obsession. Historians, collectors, even early cryptographers, all drawn to the same question, all reaching the same conclusion. Nothing worked. No method held, no theory lasted, no interpretation survived scrutiny. Every attempt collapsed. And yet the manuscript remained exactly the same. Unchanged, unresponsive, unaffected. As if the search itself didn't matter. And that's when the realization set in. If this many people, with this much knowledge, this much time, this much effort, couldn't find a single answer, then maybe the problem wasn't that something was missing. Maybe it was never meant to be found. At some point, the story should have ended. A missing man, an unsolved text, no answers. But it didn't. Because the contradictions began. Notes, ones that weren't part of his original work, started to appear. Margins filled with symbols that didn't match his handwriting, but matched the manuscript perfectly. Scholars couldn't agree on when they were written. Some claimed they had always been there. Others insisted they appeared later. No one could prove either. Then there were the copies. Fragments of the manuscript reproduced by different hands in different places at different times. But when compared side by side, they didn't match exactly. Not in a way you could easily explain. Small differences, subtle shifts, just enough to make you question which version was real. And then came the accounts. Reports, scattered, inconsistent, of individuals claiming they had seen the text before. Not this exact book, but something like it. In collections that no longer existed, in archives that couldn't be verified. Always similar, never identical. Even the illustrations refused to stay consistent. Plants that changed shape, diagrams that seemed incomplete or rewritten. It was as if the manuscript wasn't fixed. as if it wasn't a single object, yes, but a moving target. Every attempt to define it only made it harder to pin down. And the deeper researchers went, the less the details aligned. Timelines blurred, sources conflicted, observations contradicted each other. Until eventually, you were left with a different kind of question. Not what is this book, but has it ever been the same to begin with? At this point, there's no single explanation. Only theories. And each one changes the story completely. The first is the most grounded. That the manuscript is a code. A carefully constructed cipher designed to hide knowledge in plain sight. Maybe medical, maybe botanical, maybe something considered too dangerous for its time. It would explain the structure, the repetition, the consistency. And history has seen codes like this before. But here's the problem. Every known method of decryption has failed. Not partially, completely. Which brings us to the second theory. That it's not a code at all. That it was never meant to be read. Some believe the entire manuscript is an elaborate fabrication. A work of art designed to look meaningful without actually containing meaning. A deception. Maybe to impress collectors, maybe to secure funding, maybe to create the illusion of knowledge where none existed. It would explain the contradictions, the inconsistencies, the shifting details. But if that's true, why is the structure so precise? Why does it follow patterns that should lead somewhere but never do? And then there's the third theory. The one most people hesitate to say out loud. What if the manuscript isn't failing us? What if we're failing it? What if it was never designed for the way we think? Not a code, not a hoax, but a system built on rules we don't understand. A language from a framework we've never encountered. Something that exists just outside the limits of human interpretation. It would explain everything. And nothing. Because if that's true, then this isn't a mystery waiting to be solved. It's a boundary we're not meant to cross. Today, the manuscript still exists. Carefully preserved, protected, studied. It sits inside Yale University, cataloged, documented, and still not understood. Modern technology has tried. artificial intelligence, pattern analysis, linguistic models trained on every known language. They've all looked at it. And yet, no one has read a single line with certainty. Not one sentence we can say without doubt is true. Researchers continue to return to it again and again. Not because they're close to solving it, but because they can't let it go. Because something about it feels intentional, deliberate, like it's waiting, not to be decoded, but to be understood in a way we haven't discovered yet. And maybe that's the part that lingers. Maybe the real mystery isn't what the manuscript says. Maybe it's why, after all this time and with everything we know, we still can't even agree on what it is.